Okay, it is 1 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump in and get started. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. We're so excited to have our first feedback session after the first administrative window in this pilot. So I'll just go ahead and get started here and go through the agenda of what we're going to be covering today. And then after I go through the agenda, I'll pass it to Chris Noel, who is our Senior Manager of Teaching and Learning here at the OPI. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Samantha. I'm the project manager for the MAST pilot. Hi. So we will go ahead and give a little welcome and kind of run through the pilot so far, what we accomplished in the last month or so. And then we will go through the results of the survey that was sent out that everyone had a chance, hopefully, to partake in. And if you didn't partake in the survey, that's okay, because we will have a chance for you to give feedback here today as well. After that, we'll go through some frequently asked questions, and then we'll go through the score reports and how to look at the score reports and go through any questions that you might have surrounding the score reports, and then next steps. So Chris, are you ready?
Yes, I am ready, Sam. And I just want to explain, I don't have my video on today. I've been having a little bit of an issue with lag. And so we have some folks here who will let us know if my audio is having any struggles. And so welcome. We're so glad to be here with you today. I think when we think about the last month, as we went through the first round of testlets in November, there's just so much to be really excited about as we move forward. And so if we can go into the next slide, we want to express our appreciation, because the reality is that we did it. We had 33 districts with 62 schools and 75 educators participating. We saw 4,156 unique individuals rostered and 5,529 sets of assessments were completed. And of course, we know that each testlet is small and they come in these sets. And so that number, that 5,000, is the groupings of tests that were completed, or testlets. This is really exciting. Those are some really big numbers, and we couldn't have done any of that without you as we think about how we are learning together about assessment and about what works in Montana. Next slide, please. Today we're gonna, back one. Sorry. Today we're gonna provide a few opportunities for engagement. And so we'll drop this link into the chat right now. If you wanna click in, we'll be using these as we go. And so we'll put the link back in the chat a few times, but many of you replied to the survey. As we share some of the data, we're looking for additional information. And so as we get to each of these sections, we'll provide you a chance in the Padlet to share with us what you would want us to be thinking about adding or considering beyond what we've shared on the slides today. We hope that that provides a space where we're able to learn and grow together and really approach this as a united team, learning about assessment and learning about Montana and learning about what works for kids. Next slide, please. So the first thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about how things went in the first window. So the first thing, as you all know, we did a series of trainings. We did 2 different training workshops, and there were options in terms of time of when you would be attending. The session 1 had a kind of larger overview of the pilot, some content coverage, discussion of accommodations, discussion of the reporting timelines, and an introduction to the KITE system. In session 2, we got into a lot more detail about the KITE system itself, the login process, how to manage accounts. And it was in that session where we began to really, as a group, understand some of the ways that this is different than our other platforms. What I find interesting is that we had 108 unique individuals who attended at least one session of this training. We only had 75 educators participating in the pilot. We know that not every educator attended the trainings. And so we're really encouraged to see that we had a nice distribution of leaders and educators learning together as we moved into that training round. Next slide, please. When we set out to engage in this pilot, we talked a lot about the number of students that we would need to have participating in order to reach a point where we feel that we have valid and reliable data to move forward into future years of the pilot and towards that eventual conclusion of knowing whether a through-year assessment can work for Montana. What you see on the screen are the actual numbers of the students that completed each of the sets of testlets. And so we see that we kind of hit that 1,600 threshold in grade 7 ELA. The other 3 levels that we had, we didn't hit that 1,600 threshold. Thankfully, we had built in a little bit of room for us to have attrition across the year. At this time, we believe that we have solid data for the purpose of doing the analysis of the field test items. That means that every item that was administered was seen by enough students to reasonably do that field test analysis and review the item data later. We still have some questions as we move throughout the larger window about how many students we will have who complete all testlets. We know that that's a little bit of a separate goal, that we have one goal that relates to the items and our ability to say that we have valid and reliable data for each of those items. We have a separate goal that relates to the idea of a summative score. And in order to assign that summative score, we know that we need to have consistency and participation throughout the year. And so while we're very excited about how the first round of testlets went, we're also leaning in on the question of how do we make sure that each and every one of these students who participated in round 1 feel excited and welcome and engaged as they move towards round 2. And so that's one of the things we'll talk a little bit today is what do we want to do to best support districts as we get ready for window 2. Next slide, please, Sam. The Window 1 survey was distributed, and many of you replied to the Window 1 survey, and we're going to look at some of that data here today. And Sam did a beautiful job launching and administering the survey so that we have this data to look at together. We opened that survey on November 18th, and 62 individuals responded to the survey. The vast majority of those were teachers. In fact, 67% were teachers. We had a much lower response rate from those who are participating and supporting this project from other roles. And I think when we look at the data, we might see that emphasis on the volume of feedback that we had from teachers. Today, as we think about other feedback you'd like to share, those of you who fill other roles, if you feel like your experience was not represented, we'd invite you to really consider adding to the feedback that we received in Window 1 survey, knowing that the vast majority of it did come from teachers. The purpose of giving out this survey was to help us to understand what your experience looked like and felt like in a way that allowed us to pivot and consider and adapt for window 2 if needed. So that survey closed on December 9th. And so we have had the final data for a few days here now that we're at the 14th. And so the next slide is going to show us a distribution of responses on the first multiple choice question.
And I just wanted to note that I actually reopened the survey because I found that there were still some people that wanted to take it. So if you took it after December 9th, your responses are included in the data on this PowerPoint.
Excellent, thank you. So when the first question that we asked was for you to rate your experience in preparing to administer the testlets. That includes things like installing the platform, activating an account, doing the assignment of students to teachers or rostering, exporting student logins in order to print those tickets and test materials for students. What we see in this data is that the vast majority of our respondents felt that this was an easy system to use. Again, we know that the individuals who were responding to this, who might have the strongest feelings about this question, would be the test coordinators, the principals, the counselors, the administrators, the superintendents. And so this is an area where we're hopeful that the responses from the teachers are representative of all user groups. Next slide, please. The next item was similar only in this case, we asked the question about administering the testlets. So while we know that often it is the test coordinator that does a significant amount of the preparation, the teachers are the ones doing the administration. And so we know that 67% of responses from teachers, we really want to hear what they're saying here when we think about the administration of the testlets. And while in this case, we did have an individual who noted that they found it difficult, not just difficult, extremely difficult, we still see a vast majority of respondents noting that it was easy to administer these testlets. Of course, we didn't just ask for that one point of data. We gave you the opportunity to share with us your thoughts in words. And we've selected a few summary responses to kind of help see the shape, the breadth of what types of things were shared. So on the next slide, we're going to see things that came in that were positive about either preparing to administer or, and yes, you can go, Sam, thank you. Either preparing to administer or actually administering. And so I'm going to be quiet for just a minute and let us all take some time to read and reflect on what we see on this page. If you have something you'd like to share, please feel free to do that in the chat. So when oh yes, sorry.
I was just going to let everyone know that if they would like to say something out loud, they can raise their hand and we can unmute them to say their comment out loud.
Perfect, thank you. Sam, that was exactly what I was about to say. If you have something that you'd like to share or point out to the group verbally, you can raise your hand. Or if you want to put something in the chat. This is also a good time, though, to look at the Padlet that we put in. When we think about the administration preparation, positive feedback, or testlet administration, positive feedback, this would be a good time to add any thoughts that you have very officially into our system of feedback, to note things that you don't see on our summary here. When I look at the summary of this information, the thing that stood out to me most was the ways in which the respondents to the survey compared this system to the other systems that we use. And it felt really refreshing. In many cases, people compared it to the TIDE system, and you were able to point out for us in cases things that were easier here or things that were different in ways that you didn't appreciate as much or were more difficult here. And I think that's some of the feedback that we find most valuable because it helps us to understand how the shift or change is having an impact. As we know that we're kind of still in a high stakes assessment space, we're still in a space that requires high security. Seeing the ways in which you prefer this over other systems or ways that this system is not working for you as well as other systems is incredibly valuable for us. Which leads us to the next slide, which is that there were some things that you didn't like as much and that you thought might need some improvement. I think in terms of this slide, I'd like to speak a little bit to some of the things that we are summarizing here and what they mean to us in order to help contextualize any additional feedback you'd like to share. In terms of preparing to administer, and again, we kind of see here that we have a lot higher volume of responses from teachers. And because teachers were much more focused on administering the testlets, not all of the prep work, we do not have as many comments to read through there. We did note that there were many individuals or some individuals who responded who really felt like just any change to a new platform is hard. And we need to make sure that we're acknowledging and keeping track of that. It also feels a little bit challenging around the shift from a test settings to a PNP, this way of even talking about what types of things we're able to put in to manipulate the experience that students will have to make it better match their IEP. So that was something where we just kind of heard a little bit that there was something different about that, and that felt like something that was challenging from a preparation standpoint. In terms of administering the testlets, we've definitely heard that it took longer than was expected. And that's something that we're spending some time really digging in to think about where and how is that happening? What is it that can be adjusted or adapted to make it such that the tests are kind of closer to hitting that expectation of time? We heard from a few people within Window, and then again in the survey, that we really struggled a little bit with how the testlets were coming. The way that it's been described to me by many of you is the part where the student goes in, they take a testlet, and then when they're done, it pops them back out to the main screen, and then they're going to go back in and take the next testlet again. That mechanism of how the multiple testlets are loaded felt bumpy to folks. And so that's something that we're really thinking about, whether it's a training support or conversations with our vendor. How can we help that to feel smoother? We really heard some things about rosters, and we'll talk a little bit more about rosters and what the link is between loading students into the system and then rostering them for the purpose of administering the assessment. But it does feel like this is an area where we can lean in on having a little bit more support and making sure that if there is a best practice around how to think about rostering, that we are making space to do that. And we definitely did hear that the biggest issue with that had to do with monitoring during the test. Content and wording on the math provided a challenge in some schools or districts, and we heard a little bit about that in different ways. And I wanted to acknowledge when we wrote this summary that it was a little bit about the content itself, which we know that's another discussion that we need to talk about what about this thing where kids maybe haven't been taught some of the content yet. But beyond that, we kind of saw some things around wording. And so that's something that we're paying a lot of attention with our vendor on. How do we think about making sure that we are fully understanding the wording on the items and what felt bumpy about that for our districts. And then really looking at this question of the content that was included on this round of testlets, kind of why was it all focused on reading and not the other components? And so those are things that we're working through, having received that feedback. How do we best provide support to either offset some of these challenges that are just a natural part of piloting an assessment, or to very directly address them to make this a more comfortable experience going forward? I see that a few folks have put a thing or two into the Padlet, and I think when, if you have other things that are coming up, if you want to take time to put things there. I'd also like to encourage those of you, whether you submitted the survey or not, to say out loud anything that you are thinking about missing feedback here that you really are hoping that we're considering moving forward. Okay, hearing no additions that people want to give in real time here, let's move on and talk a little bit about frequently asked questions. As we came out of the survey and we really, we came out of this round of testlet administration, and we began to think about the feedback, and we began to think about the score reports and all of the things that we would be doing moving forward. We took some time, and our partners at New Meridian took some time to reflect on what frequently asked questions we've had, what we've already posted, what we haven't posted yet, and what needs to be added. And so I know this is a lot of words on this slide. These are the frequently asked questions that we had focused on providing in advance of the first testlet administration. When I think about the content of these, they were very much focused on the types of questions that an administrator might be asking when making the decision to participate. And so we recognize that as we moved out of this first round of testlets, that we might need some new types of questions posted and with responses. And that doesn't mean we'll take these down. But these questions that we have here, and I apologize, I need to turn my notifications off on Padlet so you don't hear those every time that they come through. When we really wanted to be thoughtful and add some questions. And so as we came forward with these score reports, we have a few new frequently asked questions that we're going to add in and provide responses to. And so Sam, if we could move to that. So the 4 questions that we're adding coming out of the pilot or coming out of window 1, the first one is, if this is a pilot and some of the items may never make it to an operational test, why are student level reports being produced? Another question is, my students didn't perform well on the math test because they've not been taught the content. What should I do with this data? Another related question, why are my students seeing content they've not been taught yet? And then the final one, why did the assessment take longer than I expected for some students? And we're releasing now frequently asked question responses to these 4 items as we move forward in an attempt to really resolve some of the big questions that we heard in the feedback survey. And as we came out of that, 2 of the ones that we hear most often, we've actually put onto the slide here, and then we have access to the full document for everyone. But if we can go to the next slide to see that question. And Sam, I'm going to ask if you could read and address this question while I turn off my notifications.
Yeah, of course. So this question that we got a lot was, what is the optimal way to roster? Because some people found that monitoring was difficult because they had more than just one class's worth of students on their roster. So rostering can be done in any way that you choose to. So if it makes sense for you to put all the students in grade 5 math on one roster, you can do that. But it might help teachers to see students better if they're broken up into smaller groups by classroom or period. So that would mean having multiple rosters for one teacher, so that they can monitor each class as they go, as they're testing, instead of having more than just their class being shown on the roster. So I will.
Yes. Thank you, Sam.
Please raise your hand or put it in the Q&A.
And I want to just say something briefly about rostering, which, in addition to what Sam shared, at this state, we don't collect for most districts any information about which students are in which classroom. And so as you have questions or would like support with rostering, it's really helpful when you reach out to us, if you set up a time or a way when you can transmit to us some more information about how your students are grouped into classes. That allows us in many cases to better understand what the best structure would be for rostering, as that is variable based, like Sam said, on how you have your students structured.
Yeah. And I do see a comment in the chat, just talking about that it was difficult to monitor because the names did not slide with the progress bar. And I do know what you're talking about, the person that put that comment in. And I will pass that comment to the technical support side of the Kite platform to see if there's anything that they can do to make it easier to monitor the students in that way.
Thank you. The next question has to do with, why are my students seeing content they've not yet been taught? Because this is a pilot that we are very excited to be participating in. When we had the opportunity and the funding available to participate this year and to have this be the first year of piloting, we're very excited about that. That does mean that in order to get that small scale pilot moving this year, we needed to make a fixed design for both the order and the timing of the testlets throughout the year. That was a necessary design feature. We recognize that based on the timing of when that information was finalized, it does mean that in some cases, students were very much not exposed to content before the day of testing. But beyond that, that teachers and educators and principals didn't have potentially enough time to evaluate whether it's possible even to match the timing of the assessments throughout the year to your content. to your adopted curriculum. We know that this is a major concern because each curriculum that is adopted sets what we've planned for in the year. And so unfortunately, in this year, we need to make sure that we have, as it says in the frequently asked question text, administrative uniformity, right? We need to make sure that we're able to have data that we can manage and use and manipulate. In the long run, the goal is to be flexible in the ways that teachers are giving us feedback feels best to them, being able to pick potentially the order and the timing. Right now, we are not able to do that this year, but we are going to be showing you today the exact topics that are being covered in future windows. We know that you may have a scope and sequence and a curriculum that's set for the year that you are very, very comfortable with, and that is the scope and sequence you will continue with, and that's okay. We will be sharing some opportunities for teachers to share with us what their scope and sequence is. Did we cover this material to help us to better use the data that we receive? We're going to talk a little bit when we talk about the score reports about how to interpret and use the data that we are receiving on the score reports, especially in relation to this content issue of knowing that the content was not covered for all students in advance of the test. In the Padlet space, we've given you the opportunity to suggest some additional frequently asked questions, things that you're wondering that you didn't see it on the list that I put up. You really feel like it is something we haven't gotten out enough information about. I think that if we can know from you more clearly which things we are here to support, we will be able to develop and produce the materials that districts feel very good about receiving. Next slide, Sam. Okay, so the score reports, and in the Padlet, I just have a relatively open-ended space that just says score report support requests. So we're going to talk a little bit about the score reports and some information about how we can use the score reports, some thinking about the score reports. I also can see that there are a few requests that are in the Padlet already, and I'll try to address those as we go. But let's look together at the first of our slides about score reports. So when you receive the score reports, you notice that within the score report, there's a lot of information. Within the body of the score report itself, there's a skill description, and that skill description tells you for the specific item at a fairly fine-tuned grain size what the student was being asked, what skill was being assessed in that, or knowledge, most often skill. We then have the Common Core State Standards code. This allows us to align to the Common Core State Standards. Now, our state standards for math and ELA are related to the Common Core State Standards. They are not exactly the same. Those codes and relationships do hold up, though, to our standards, and they do allow us to partner on this assessment with other states by sharing that code language there. In terms of the credit, there are a few different ways in which credit can be shown. One is that no credit was earned. That tells us that the student tried the question but did not receive credit. That is unique from the final option, which is question unanswered, which means that the student did not attempt to answer the question. And so when we see that X versus the empty circle, well, in both cases, it means that they were not able to earn any credit or demonstrate any proficiency. One is by omission, and one is because the student engaged with the material and did not produce correct responses. In between there, we have partial credit earned or full credit earned, where we can see that half circle or that full circle. Most often when we look at score reports, we're used to thinking about the idea of proficiency, of seeing whether a student or a class or a group of students is proficient on an assessment. In order for us to speak to proficiency and assessment, we need two things. One, we need a full blueprint that has all of the items that would be assessed. And two, we need to have cut scores that show what proficiency would mean or look like. In the case of a field test, we have neither of those. And that's why this score report is formatted the way it is. The score report allows us to see that a student did or did not understand a question well enough to produce a response that would earn credit or earn a score. What we don't want to do with this information, though, is to make too much meaning out of it, because these items are still in field test status. That means that any one of these items could be determined by the OPI to not meet our criteria for an assessment item that we would want to use in our state. We do that all the time in our other assessments where we field test an item, we review the data, and we decide this doesn't seem right for our kids. And that could be because of the item and feedback we received on it. It could be because of the data. When I was working on the science assessment, I remember a year when there was an assessment item that I received calls about almost every day of the window. Somebody struggled with that item, and it was a field test item. And so there was no part of me that was surprised when the data on that item indicated that we should not retain it. But even if the data had been strong, it would have wanted to have a conversation with our vendor about whether we needed to change that item based on just the phone calls that I'd received. And so I think remembering as you're engaging with these score reports that there are many, many steps that will still happen after this point with these items, that they are a pilot. This is in essence an experiment to see, can we have assessments that are happening in real time like this? And so I'm very grateful that we have a score report. Most often in a pilot situation, we are not able to produce a score report at all. And so I look forward to working with teachers over the next weeks and months to think about how this score report can be used, what we're learning from it, and whether it's providing useful information that helps us to change instruction as we move throughout the year. Next slide, Sam. When we think then about interpreting the results, that big question looms. Did your students have the opportunity? Were they exposed to the content before the test came? So most of us as teachers, when we look through that list of skills, if that's our classroom, we can pretty quickly kind of say, yep, I did that, I didn't do that, this will come in 3 weeks, that already happened, because the language in that skills statement really is often very aligned with how we think about our instruction. For others of us, thinking about the standards themselves as a way of being aligned and thinking about instruction. And so as we have school leaders or educators engaging and interacting with the score reports, we really encourage everyone to take a step back and first answer the question, do I think my students were taught this? Do I think this was covered? If the answer is yes, then the data in the score reports helps us to understand strengths and weaknesses for that content area. We might determine that we need some more support because we taught this content and students are not demonstrating via that percent complete or percent correct information provided. We're not seeing that proficiency show up on the assessment. And so even though we don't know that it's proficiency, when we see that a lot of students struggled with it, we might conclude that we should do some follow-up instruction. It's possible, though, that our students struggled with that item because it was really hard. And so we encourage, even in those situations, that it is just a guideline, a rule of thumb, something to think maybe this is something that I could touch back on. And especially in the cases where we have multiple related items, if in all cases students struggled, we would want to follow up. Whereas if it was that students seemed to do well on 2 out of the 3 related items, that might be an indication that the 3rd item was just much more difficult. We should definitely always be using these results, though, even if we taught the material within the context of our instructional plan. We want to make sure that we're not using this assessment in isolation or as a single data point because of the nature of the field test items themselves. So even if we've taught it, even if our kids got everything correct on the things that we taught, we still want to make sure that we're putting that in context. In the event that I'm interpreting results that I know I did not teach this material, I know that within my classroom, students were not yet exposed to this, we probably shouldn't expect that they would have gotten everything correct. We might be able to then use the results for any student who was receiving correct responses, was getting points for that and had that full or partial. That might be an indication that that student is ready for more challenging material. It might be an indication that a student has already reached proficiency on that content. We wouldn't, of course, want to take that in isolation, but it is a space where when we know we haven't taught it and students are doing what we would consider well, maybe that is an indication that I have room to do some extensions in my classroom. Some students may have performed very well, even if we haven't been exposed to that. And so we really want to make sure that we're watching for that, that we're watching for those places, and that in the event that we haven't covered the content and our students don't know it, aren't demonstrating that they know it or have mastered those skills, we want to make sure that we really are holding on to that and not sharing the score reports with students or families in a way that could feel punitive, especially given that we may be aware we didn't cover all of the content. I think this is our last slide, Sam, about the score reports, or is there another slide after this?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. So before we move on to a discussion of next steps, we've been pretty quiet. I'd love to hear a little bit from those of us that are here in the room today, thinking about this yes, no around interpreting results. What have you been seeing or feeling or experiencing as you've been looking at the score reports as they've come in?
Go ahead, Dana.
Dana, you may need to unmute yourself, but you should be able to do that now. There we go.
Okay. Hi, again, I'm Dana Herring. I gave the 7th grade ELA assessment here in Kalispell. Today, I was sharing my students' individual score reports with them individually, one at a time at my desk. And I certainly did see that the areas that I know we have specifically talked about, such as theme and central idea, they perform much better on, but there were certainly areas that that we haven't taught, and of course the students didn't do well. But I couched it all in terms of, oh, that's because I haven't done this yet.
Yeah.
No reflection on you at all. And before I showed them individual score reports, I put an anonymous one because I just blanked out the kid's name up on the screen to explain it to them overall, and then brought them to see individual score reports. And they seemed glad to see the results. They had all asked to see the results. You know, some of my more high performing students were they acted a little alarmed at how many they had missed. So definitely in showing the kiddos the score reports, it's important to let them know, remember, this was in November, kiddo. We haven't done all the things.
Yeah. How did students, I mean, you said that they were a little surprised. Did students seem to, at that 7th grade level, be capable of reflecting on, oh yeah, I haven't learned these things yet? Or how did those conversations go?
It would have been, they went really well. The kids were kind of quiet about it. I know all the reasons why we don't get to see copies of the questions while reviewing that, but for some of them were really trying to remember, oh, what was that item like? What was that? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm not allowed to look at the items. So yeah, and when I would point out to them kind of what that sort of item would look like, they would kind of nod in recognition. And then go, yeah, we really haven't talked about that in class, have we? So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Are there other folks here today that have similar or contrasting experiences to share? I noticed that one of the things that came up in the score report request section talked a little bit about a whole class overview. That is something that we can continue to talk with our vendors about. I know I just will say that, and then the second question actually that's in there has to do with again, a more summary level. And my response to that would actually in large measure be the same. Because these are pilot items, I think I mentioned that we typically do not have any type of score report. Because of that, that kind of leads into the reason why we try not to look at aggregate. And in part because we don't, the moment we begin to aggregate things, we get into a world where we're presenting numbers in a way that makes them seem very official. And because these score reports really are just an attempt to document, based on the topic, how whether it was partially correct or fully correct. When we start to aggregate that across students, we're actually manipulating the data again further into a space where it becomes even less reliable or less appropriate to draw conclusions from. And so both looking at what it means to look across a class or what it looks like to have more summary across the testlet itself for a student. Well, we know that that is an instinct as a teacher, that is my instinct as well, to go through and say, well, did everybody in my class get the same one wrong? We can look at whether there are ways to appropriately present that information so that we can provide that scaffold for teachers to help them in their larger scale thinking, not just at the student level, but across all of my class or across all of my classes. However, I do want to say that we will need to be cautious and make sure that we're considering psychometrics and some of the very important statistical features of doing a pilot like this. And as with all of the other places where this has come up, we appreciate your patience as we really strive to learn together about something that's very new and very innovative, and that will provide responses to lots of other people as well. And so we appreciate your support as we are in this space and cannot provide as much data as we might like to, but to know that that is so that the data can be valid in the end. Any other questions or comments on the score reports, comments on how the administration went? Any aha moments that you have seeing the data here today, the data about the administration or the data about the survey? Seeing no hands and hearing or no comments, what I'd love to do is actually turn the time over to Sam to talk a little bit about window number 2 so that we can think about these next steps.
Thanks, Chris. So the next window is coming up in January. Oops. It's going to be January 17th through the 30th. The dates are kind of odd because the 16th is a holiday, so we gave you one extra day on Monday to administer. And I just wanted to let you know that if you, after hearing that information about rostering and making monitoring easier by kind of adjusting rostering, that I and the KITE team are available to help you kind of manipulate where students are showing up. And maybe if you want to chunk them out into class, we can help with that before this next window comes through. And then I'll show which standards are going to be measured on in the next window. And I will get this up on our website as well. I'll get all this information that you've seen today up on the website, but I thought this would be helpful for the next window, as I don't know if it was as available as it should have been for the first window. So I just wanted you to see it here, or as it could have been.
Does anybody have any questions about the window 2 standards?
And I think window 2 will go a lot. Oh, Dana has a question. Go ahead, Dana.
Will you be able to go deeper? Because those aren't really standards. Those are kinds of texts for ELA.
Dana, we do have a document that has this information across all of the windows.
Okay.
And I think, I don't know whether, if there's somebody here who would like to unmute and speak to that question, I think that would be appropriate in this case. The way that I think of these is that they are the strands that are being covered. And I think you said the types of text. I think often we do use the word strands for that. And so within that strand, any standard within the strand could be addressed. In terms of the exact skill descriptors for that assessment, for those testlets, that level of detail is not yet available. But I think my understanding is that it's every standard within that strand could be on this assessment. Now I saw Julie unmute her video, and so she may have more information than I do about that.
Chris, I was just going to pull up for you and drop into the chat there, the tool that we had that kind of mapped this out in a little bit more detail. So I will put that in there.
Thank you.
Yep, I'll put the link. It's right on our website so that you have it, Dana.
Any other questions about expectations for window 2? I think what we talked about here today in terms of that score report, I want to make it clear that this is not us asking every teacher who's participating in the pilot to upend their year and cover these things before window 2. However, we did hear that feedback, and we want to make sure that whether we're going to cover the material in advance or not, that teachers and educators and principals and everybody, all of the stakeholders within this pilot, at least know going in that whether I'm going to cover numerical expressions in my grade 5 class before the testlet occurs or not doesn't need to change, but at least I'm aware that's what's going to be on the testlet. I think for myself as an educator, there are some times that I can imagine that with a 2-week window, whether or not I had covered one of these things could change within the window because it's scheduled to be covered in week 1 of the window. And so I think being aware of that is part of our goal, allowing every educator to just have that information and then make the decision that's best for their kiddos. And there's a new question that showed up in the Padlet that asked, will these testlets spiral? You'll notice that with the ELA, there's going to be more spiraling that happens over the math. And that does have to do with the increasing complexity of how the standards are structured in ELA. Math at this time has less spiraling. In terms of the follow-up question that people many times have about that has to do with, will they spiral once we have flexibility included? And I think that is one of the things as we engage in interviews and we engage with educators over the next months in this pilot, is one thing that we're really going to want to understand is what's the appropriate way to think about whether a standard would be tested only once or at other points throughout the year. And so this year, that's one of the things that we'll be learning more about as we have math content that does not spiral quite as significantly as the ELA content does.
Chris, this is
Yes.
Julie. Sam, I don't know if you could click on that link for Dana really quick. I just want to show her the alignment to the standards and then kind of the components of that in more detail. I put it in the chat.
Yep, let me pull it up for you. One
And
sec.
Chris, like what you said is the intention around the ELA is it does spiral with complexity, which does look a little bit different than the mathematics. You'll see a repeat of the same standards in each of the administration windows. So if you scroll down to page right there's administration 2 on the 3rd page there. That's for the 5th grade. So you'll see there in the middle column is alignment to the Common Core state standards, and then the attributes of each of those. So it gets, as Dana was saying, a little bit more down into the detail as to what those items are looking at. So, and then 7th grade is in there as well as you scroll down for administration 2. So this looks a little bit different, as Chris mentioned, because it does spiral in complexity. So you'll see a repeat from administration 1 to administration 2. Thanks. I just want to be sure you got that.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you for providing that link. That is a much more detailed view of it and actually shows you more throughout the year. I know Anne works with our partner. And if there's more that you'd like to share beyond what Julie and I shared, I moved you into the room.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just wanted to say that while the sessions don't separate out standards, like, for example, students wouldn't only see key ideas and detail type standards in the first session and then only see vocabulary in the second. Their experience should be cohesive and integrated. The things that change are going to be, as you said, the text complexity across the year, starting with readily accessible at the beginning and growing in complexity. And also the items that are created have essentially attribute tags. And what that means is that based on a learning progression, there is an idea that students will understand the very basic core principles in a standard in kind of the most basic way. So students generally understand their text explicitly before they're maybe feel really confident about inferencing, or that they're more able to manage single types of text elements before they're asked to compare lots of different types of text elements, or answering a question but not having to provide evidence is a more straightforward, simple cognitive task than providing that evidence. So not only are the texts going to change, but the expression of that standard and the sophistication of the students' engagement of that with that standard is going to change across the year. So you saw items at the beginning of the year that had a bulk of explicit types of questions. They weren't asked to provide evidence. And then as the year goes on, they're going to be asked to inference more. They're going to be asked to provide evidence, sometimes even evidence that might be in distant proximity. They're going to be asked to synthesize more often, juggle some multiple text elements. So there are a number of kind of moving pieces in this. So instead of just the standards changing, the way the standards are presented to the students and the levels of complexity in the standards, you should see those change throughout the year.
Thanks, Anne. That's very helpful.
Yes,
Hope you
thank you. I unmuted and then muted. We did discover that that document is inaccessible to some individuals on this call. Likely it is behind our firewall here at the OPI. And so I just dropped a PDF version of it. Again, that is a document that we intend to have on our website, and we will make sure to get that posted.
I hope it's not behind a firewall. It is available on our website.
Yes.
I haven't heard that the link on the website isn't working, but I'll double check that as well. But it's available in the toolkit that on our website on the MAST page.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. I think that it's just the link we put in came off of the internet. So we will make sure that, but I just dropped this in there since it is available on our website. You could download it there. You also will see that file in the chat if you'd like to look at it. Sam, could we go back into the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Are there any other questions that people would like to bring up or discuss while we're all together here today? Those of us that are up here on the panelist side of it, we can definitely stay on for a few minutes if anybody wanted to ask a question but was uncomfortable in front of the larger group. We have all of our contact information up on the website, and we look forward to hearing from you and interacting with you and supporting you as we move from this administration into the next administration. We are very excited about the numbers that came in. We're excited about how many students engaged with this assessment. We're excited about the possibilities that lay ahead of us as we continue to expand throughout this year to the additional administrations, and in the coming years as we expand out to additional grade levels, and we're able to reach that point of speaking about proficiency and about the idea of a summative score moving forward. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Actually, thank you, Laura. Laura asked a question that came to us as hosts and panelists. Sam, can we just put up on the screen the last two windows, the exact dates that we have?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll pull that up right now. And I see 2 hands have gone up as well. So I'm gonna unmute Kurt first and allow you to talk.
Hi, sorry I've been subbing for PE as well as trying to watch this. Just 2 questions I had, and if I missed it, sorry. One is, did anybody else run into kids being able to take the first test slit and then all of a sudden their name just disappeared off a roster for the next 2, or depending on the subject, the next 1? We ran into that with one teacher, and it was just one teacher. They kept showing up on the roster, but Kite never could figure out what happened. I was seeing if anyone else ran into that. And then 2, is there ever gonna be, for the data of, like, we saw each individual kid's scores, but is there gonna be any like overall view of your school or grade level, or per question overall, how did the group score? Oh, I'm not hearing. I think Chris, you're on mute.
You did. Yes, sorry.
No, it's all right.
The first question that you asked in terms of if anyone else had that issue, I'm not aware of that issue occurring for anyone else. It was not something that came up in our review of common issues. And so if it occurred and hit another district, it didn't rise to the surface in that way on our larger list. In terms of your second question, we did talk a little bit about that. I'll just say it again, because I know we all are very busy and it can be hard to hear every part. Because the data is still in field test status and we don't know yet, because we have not had a chance to do an item level analysis, whether items will be determined to have been too difficult overall. It is challenging to look at data in the aggregate. Every time we put together the data and look at it in a more, a bigger view or at a higher level, any errors or issues that are happening in the items just get more and more problematic. And so until we have gotten a little bit further into that item data, we are very cautious about presenting data that's not respectful of statistics. And so at this time, we're just looking at the student reports until we get a little bit further down into the pilot.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. I don't miss gym class. No, thank you. Thank you, Kurt, for reminding me of that.
Hi, this is Dana. I did have my hand up. I just went ahead and typed my questions in the window 2 suggestions.
Okay.
And I realized I just didn't want to take other people's time with them because my students think they know everything, so they think they can suggest. But one asked for a Control F functionality so that they could find words within the text because they're used to using that when they do research and other things. And another student, who arguably just got new glasses right afterward, said that text was way too cramped and hard to parse out. It's also probably important to note that we use probably the cheapest Chromebooks on the whole planet. So anyway, I told my kiddos I would pass those suggestions along. So there you go.
Thank you. Those are great suggestions. One of them, I know how that occurs in our other platforms, and one of them, I'm curious now if that exists in our other platforms. So
Okay.
Thank you. I'm excited to go look them up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. If there are other questions, we're happy to continue to answer them. However, I also know that many of us are very busy and have a lot going on in our days. And so we've reached the end of our planned material to share around the information we knew coming into this session. We're happy to hear from you or be responsive to any questions or concerns that you have. But we are, again, so grateful to have you in this pilot and to be engaging in this work alongside of us.
Okay, if there's not anything else, I'll go ahead and end this session. Please feel free to email me with anything at all, and I will get back to you immediately. Thank you. Bye, everyone.